Now, tonight's subject is one of the most important, and we're dealing with the subject of the beast and the mark of the beast. And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the names of blasphemy. And the beast I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth was as the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him his power, his seat, and great authority. Now, when people think about the beast of Revelation 13, they keep saying the beast. That's not appropriate. You need to say the beasts of Revelation 13. Because you look in verse 11. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth that had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke as a dragon. Now, keep in mind, these beasts are not referring to these powers as monsters. They use different beasts that have characteristics that help identify these organizations or powers. It's not, God's word is not being derogatory. Babylon was depicted as a lion because it was majestic. Greece was depicted as a leopard because it was very swift in the way that it operated. Persia was a bear. It was a little bit ruthless and very powerful in its administration. And so the characteristics are identified. I'm just going to tell you as plain as I know. I believe, and I'm about to try to share these things from God's Word, that the first beast in Revelation 13 represents the Roman Catholic Church. The second beast represents North America. Now, am I saying that all the people in America or in the Catholic Church are going to hell? No. Prophecy is identifying things that they would do in history that affect God's church, that affects God's people. And these things needed to be portrayed. That we're not trying to be ungracious or cruel. I'm a Bible Christian. I've taken an oath to share the truth from God's Word. And God's Word prophesies information about these institutions. I love my country. I'm very supportive. I pay my taxes. But America is prophesied that it's going to be doing some strange things in the very near future. Indeed, it's happening now. And so we need to share these things because they're in the Bible, and we have to be faithful to tell the whole truth. Now, first I want you to notice it says in verse 2, this beast is like a leopard. Who was the leopard there in Daniel 7? Daniel 7 is a corresponding sister chapter to Revelation 13. The leopard was Greece. His feet were like the feet of a bear. The bear was Persia. His mouth was like the mouth of a lion. The lion was Babylon, and the dragon. And it goes on to say that this power, verse 3, one of its head is wounded to death, and the deadly wound is healed, and all the world wonders after the beast. And they worship the dragon that gave power unto the beast, and they worship the beast, saying, who's like the beast? Who's able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given to him to continue 40 and 2 months. A month in the Bible was 30 days. The Jews were on a lunar calendar. 42 times 30 is 1,260 days. A day's a year in prophecy. Now, let's go to our lesson, because this will be a good springboard for sharing the information that we have. And pray as we proceed. Pray for me, because this is, I think, for many a life and death presentation. Question number 1. In order to know what the mark is, we must first identify the beast. How does the Bible describe this first beast? Well, it gives several characteristics. It rises from the sea. It's a composite of the 4 beasts in Daniel 7. Dragon gives it its authority. It receives a deadly wound. The deadly wound is healed. It is a strong political power, a strong religious power. It's guilty of blasphemy. It wars with and overcomes the saints. It rules for 42 months. It has a mysterious number, we'll get to all these things point by point. Let's take point A. It would rise from the sea. This beast ascends up out of a densely populated area. What's the sea? Well, you read there in Revelation 17:15, the waters represent a multitude of peoples, nations, and tongues. What was the cradle of civilization when John wrote Revelation? Rome. Not when I shouldn't say cradle of civilization. What was the center of civilization? Was Rome. Matter of fact, you go to Revelation 17, the last verse, speaking of the woman who rides a beast in Revelation 17, and it says, that woman which you saw is the great city that reigns over the kings of the earth. John had just been imprisoned by Rome. Rome was the focus at that time. Well, then it's telling us this power is probably going to be located in Rome. Matter of fact, you get to Revelation 17, it says, the woman sits among 7 hills. Rome is called the city of what? 7 hills. You can look that up in the encyclopedia. Answer B. It'd be a composite of the 4 beasts in Daniel chapter 7. Now you remember there was a lion, a bear, and a leopard. That's the way they're presented by Daniel, because Daniel in prophecy is looking forward to Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece. You get to Revelation, those 3 empires have fallen. Now it says leopard, bear, lion. It's reverse order. Why? Because now John is looking backwards in time. And so it's naturally reversed. Answer C. Now I'm under 1 item C. Question 1 item C. The beast must receive its power, seat, capital, and authority from the dragon. Well, friends, that's exactly what happened in history. When the Roman Empire began to crumble and lose its influence, they basically packed their bags and moved the headquarters to Constantinople, named after Constantine. The church had now grown to be very powerful, a strong political entity. In order for the emperor, Justinian, not to lose control over the people who were almost all becoming Christians throughout the Roman Empire now, because it was politically correct to be a Christian, he said, I'm going to make the Bishop of Rome the supreme bishop of the Christian church so that I can control the church from Rome. I'm going to give him an army. The Bishop of Rome, being called the supreme bishop, was later known as the supreme Papa, or Supreme Father, or the Pope. And that happened in 538. They got their seat, their power, and their authority from the first dragon, which was papal Rome, led by the devil. And that's exactly what happened. They basically just surrendered. They said, here, you take our throne. Their headquarters is still in the very same place where the Caesars used to rule. The title, Pontifex Maximus, was a title, not only does the Pope use it, it was the title of the Caesars. The very location. Power, seat, authority, army, all was just handed down by Justinian, the Roman Emperor, in 538 AD. Answer D, it would receive a deadly wound. Well, that's what happened in 1798. They lasted 42 months. In 1798, that's when Napoleon was ascending to power. There was an incident there in Rome that caused some concern. A Frenchman had been murdered. And so Napoleon sent Berthier, his general, in. They took the Pope, marched right into Vatican City, took the Pope captive. From 538 to 1798, they had enjoyed almost uninterrupted authority over Europe, the former Roman Empire, during the Dark Ages. Answer E. Is that where I'm at? It would receive a deadly wound, and the wound would be healed, and the entire world would give homage to the beast. Well, has the wound been healed? They lost their power. Right around the time they lost their power, America began to spring up as a Protestant nation. Did you know it has been healed? The Pope is the one individual in the world who is recognized by more leaders than anyone else. The United Nations does not have a General Assembly and meet to be addressed by Billy Graham, but they do by the Pope. Why? He's just a religious leader. Or is he? Is he a religious political leader? I'll share some things with you later that I think will be astounding. Answer F. It'd be a strong political power. Well, you can read the notes in there. Ambassadors from all over the world are at the Vatican, including from the United States. Answer G. It'd become a very powerful religious organization. I think that goes without saying. Answer H. It'd be guilty of blasphemy. Now, what is blasphemy? There's a couple of biblical definitions. Jesus was accused of blasphemy when he said he could forgive sin. And the Jews rightly said, God and God only can forgive sins. That's true. That's taught through the Bible. But Jesus was God the Son, and they didn't know that. But they called it blasphemy, and they threatened to stone him when he was going to forgive sin. Do the people in the Roman Catholic Church claim to have the power to forgive sin? I'm not talking about where you and I hurt each other's feelings and we forgive you. They claim to have the power to forgive the sins of the people. Humans forgiving humans and making them available to go to God. That's why Jesus died. You can go through the Holy Spirit, through Christ, right before the throne of the Father. For a man to jump in that chain is blasphemy. Then, of course, another definition of blasphemy is when a man puts himself in the place of God. The Jews were going to stone Jesus. They say, you speak blasphemy because you, being a man, makest yourself God. You answer I, it would make war with and persecute the saints. This is a common factor of history, that all through the Dark Ages, the Spanish Inquisition, the persecution of the Huguenots, St. Valentine's Day Massacre, there are dungeons. You can go to Italy, and in England, you can even see the dungeons that are in the basement of the church where they tortured heretics. And they'll admit that. Well, again, we're not being derogatory. They'll freely admit that. And it would reign for 42 months. The answer J, we've already shown you, from 538 to 1798 is a period of 1,260 years. That prophecy is so firmly established, it's given 3 ways in Revelation, so you will not miss it. It's given as 42 months, it's given as 1,260 days, and it's given as a time, that was a year, a times, or a couple of years, and half a time, which is 180 days, same period of time, 3 different times. Answer K, it would have a mysterious number 666. Now this is something I want you to all notice on page 6 of your lesson, what it says here. The Pope's official title, and this is from their own writings, the Pope's official title is Vicarius Filii Dei, which translates in English, Vicar of the Son of God. You can also find that in a very recent publication by a Jesuit, a former Jesuit, Malachi Martin. They freely admit that. On special occasions, the Pope used to wear a triple-tiered mitre that had this placard on it. I don't know that the placard's still on it anymore, but I understand it used to be. And it translates Vicarius Filii Dei. Any of you remember in school studying Roman numerals? You know, the letters also had a numerical value. In Bible times, this was common understanding. And when he said the number of his name is, people back then knew what John was talking about. For us in English, we don't say A equals 1, B equals 2. We don't do that. But back then they knew that letters also had numerical value. The numerical value of that title of the Pope that he wears above his head adds up to 666. You know, V equals 5, I equals 1, D equals 500, so forth. Okay? When Jesus died on the cross, above his head was a placard, and it identified who he was. This is the Son of God, Jesus Christ, King of the Jews, I believe is what it said, in Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. Now, I understand that if you take the title and translate it into those 3 languages, it can also translate to 666 in all 3 of those languages. Well, that's pretty shocking. Now, does that mean that the Pope is a devil? No. He, like Nebuchadnezzar, may be a godly man. You see what I'm saying? The institution that he's connected with has some unbiblical things that the Bible is pointing out that you and I need to be aware of, because the most important thing to Jesus is the Word. Amen? The USA in Bible prophecy. Turn in your Bibles with me, please. Revelation 17. Going to do a little reinforcement on that first beast and then go to the second beast, because she's mentioned here. Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and talked with me, saying, Come here, come hither, and I'll show you the judgment of the great whore that sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet-colored beast. What color? Scarlet. Who, with names full of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman is arrayed in purple. What color? And scarlet. Adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And on her forehead, boy, forehead comes up a lot in Revelation, doesn't it? On her forehead was written a name, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Now, do you really think there's some woman walking around in the last days who's got this whole paragraph in her head, dressed like this, riding on a beast? Or is this obviously symbolic language? That's why we need these prophetic keys to unlock these things. By the way,
the Old Testament prophets of Isaiah and Ezekiel and Jeremiah, they talk about Babylon also, as well as even as far back as in the books of Genesis. You can find some reference there. I'll tell you more about that later. Now we're going to go through and look at some of the identifying characteristics of this first beast. Remember, that woman is riding the same first beast you saw in Revelation 13, right? 7 heads, 10 horns. First of all, just very quickly to review these things, it says that she's guilty of what? Blasphemy. Both scriptures say this beast is guilty of blasphemy. We've learned blasphemy is putting yourself in position of God or taking the prerogatives that belong to God. Furthermore, it says she's dressed in what color? Purple and scarlet. Purple as a color represents royalty, and scarlet as a color represents sin. The Bible says, Isaiah chapter 1, though thy sins be as scarlet. Verse 5, she's called the what? The mother. Now, what does that mean? Well, it's a mother church. A woman represents a church. The term mother, now I'm reading from the Catholic Encyclopedia, volume 6, 1909. The term mother church, however, as applied to Rome, has special significance as indicating its headship of all churches. Goes on now, get this. And the woman that you saw, if you have any doubts, last verse of the chapter, if you have any doubts about who this first beast is, we're now in Revelation 17. That woman that you saw is that great city that reigns over the kings of the earth. All right, help me. Who wrote the book of Revelation? Where was John the apostle when he wrote the book of Revelation? He was in Patmos. Was he there freely on vacation, or was he a prisoner? Who put him there? Rome. Who is ruling the world? Rome. That woman that you saw is that great city that reigns over the kings of the earth. Is there any doubt when you start thinking about a woman or church that is in Rome what this beast power is? That's why I read you that litany of Bible scholars that all agreed, and these are the great minds of the church, with what I'm teaching you. I'm not teaching you anything new or original. I'm teaching you what has been lost by the church. And we're trying to rediscover our roots as a Bible people. The average Christian in North America is biblically illiterate now. If they don't get it from the radio or television preacher, they don't know what's going on. Very few people wake up and read their Bible for themselves and study their Bible, comparing Scripture with Scripture. I hope these meetings are inspiring you to spend some time in Bible study. Amen, friends? In what year was the papacy predicted to lose its world influence? We've known and learned that in 1798, after the French Revolution, in connection with that, General Berthier captured the Pope, who died in captivity, both figuratively and literally ending the papal reign that lasted exactly 1,260 years, from 538 to 1798. Which nation was predicted to arise around the same time as the papacy was receiving his deadly wound? It says in Revelation 13, verse 11 and 12, I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth. All right? 2 horns like a lamb, and he speaks like a dragon. What country was starting out as a Christian nation like a lamb right around the time that the papacy received a deadly wound? Only one nation was being born that would become a world power that prophecy would deal with. Are you aware that many of the settlers that came to our country, they were not all conquistadors looking for money. Many of them that came were looking for religious freedom and toleration. And one of the first things the pilgrims did is they knelt down, they prayed over the Bible. It was a very religious group, some of the Puritans and the ones who first landed here. What is the significance of the beast coming up out of the earth? Well, we read earlier in the prophecy, Revelation 17 tells us the waters represent a densely populated area. What new vastly open country was in existence at that same time period? Pound for pound, people per square mile, there was a lot of land out there. This was not densely populated civilization as they had in the Roman Empire. They had all roads leading to Rome. In that part of the world, there were no roads in this part of the world. So it is a fulfillment of that prophecy. What is symbolized by the 2 lamb-like horns and then the absence of crowns? Notice, 2 horns represents the power, but there are no crowns on the horns. Have we ever had a king? Well, of course, the King of England thought he was our king, but no one sat on the throne over here. It represents freedom of religion, freedom of church, freedom of government, freedom of state. What has made this country strong is that we had a government with no king and a church with no pope. There was freedom for people to choose their government leaders and freedom for the people to choose their religion. And that's why it flourished and exploded, and it was a new nation. I mean, you just read the plaque on the Statue of Liberty, or go over here to Lincoln Memorial and read the Gettysburg Address, and it reinforced, what did Lincoln say? This new nation, will it survive? It was exploding with people who are coming seeking what? Freedom. And those principles that really first found root here are now going everywhere, aren't they? Oh, and by the way, please don't interpret anything I'm saying tonight as treasonous. I love my country. I am so glad I'm an American. Again, as the same way I said, I'm not trying to pick on our Catholic friends or the papacy. I'm not, as it hurts me to say it, our country is not always going to speak like a lamb. Prophecies are telling us that the devil hasn't changed. Does it mean I'm changing my citizenship? No, as long as I'm allowed to practice and preach my convictions, I'm so thankful. What does it mean when the prophecy in Revelation 13:11 says America will speak as a dragon? Starts out like a lamb, but it says in verse 11 of chapter 13, he spoke like a dragon. Who's the dragon? It represents the devil. And remember, the devil in chapter 12, where the dragon appears, is working through the Roman Empire. We're going to speak the same way. All right, I want to talk to you a little bit about the law. When God wrote the Ten Commandments, how many tables did he write them on? 2. As I said before, it was not because he ran out of room on one and said, I better carve another one. He did it on purpose. There is a very clear division in the Ten Commandments. The first 4 commandments deal very specifically with our responsibility and worship to God. The last 6 deal with our relationship to man, and they are civil in nature. No government should tell its constituents how to keep the first 4. This is what Roger Williams started. The freedom of religion in our country was founded on these principles of you divide the Ten Commandments the way God divided them. You don't want to be part of a country that's telling you how to keep the first 4, or what you have is a totalitarian dictatorship. A religious dictatorship is what you have. They're telling you how to worship. And can you compel someone to worship God? Our country is not a theocracy. You're not supposed to do that. Freedom of religion. But you don't want to be part of a country that doesn't support the last 6. Do you want the government saying, we're going to take care of your children, the parents have no rights? Do you want the government saying, marriage, it doesn't matter? And do you want the government saying, we don't care if people steal your property or kill you? I mean, of course the government has to support the last 6. I'm hearing very few leaders on both sides of the question understand where to draw the line. And we've got to know when unity's great, and when you got to say, I'm drawing a line when it comes to biblical truth. I'm not compromising truth for unity. What specifically will America do that will cause it to speak as a dragon? It says in Revelation 13, verse 12, he exercises all the power of the first beast before him. When did the first beast become a beast? The church in Rome made a lot of compromises, but it wasn't until they began to use an army that Justinian had given the Pope, the Bishop of Rome, to start compelling people to worship a certain way or they'd be punished. Did Jesus ever use physical force to get people to follow him? See, it's a complete detour from the principles of Christ's teaching when that happens. The church and the state will unite and enforce religious practices. That's what happened all through the Dark Ages. During the rule of the papacy from 538 to 1798, they used force to compel people to worship a certain way. When they did not cooperate, they could be tortured, they could be killed, their property could be taken away, they could be driven into the hills. Read the history about the Albigenses, the Waldenses, the Hussites. I think we've forgotten our history, and someone once said, if you do that, you're doomed to repeat it. And I'll predict we're going to repeat it.
The president arrived outside the papal library where the Pope greeted him in the small throne room. Photographers snapped their pictures when they were joined by translators for a private meeting. After their meeting, the president and the Pope exchanged gifts. The Pope gave the president a copy of his papal letter, The Joy of the Gospel, in which he calls for a church that is poor and for the poor, and the president offered this.
Some seeds for the garbage. These, I think, are carrots. So each one has a different seed in it. The box is made from timber from the first cathedral built in the United States. So, if you have a chance to come to the White House, we can show you our garden.
Our constitutional journey did not stop then, and it must not stop now, Judge. And we'll be faced with equally consequential decisions in the 21st century. Can a microscopic tag be implanted in a person's body to track his every movement? There's actual discussion about that. You will rule on that, mark my words, before your tenure is over. Can brain scans be used to determine whether a person is inclined toward criminality or violent behavior? You will rule on that. And Judge, I need to know whether you will be a justice who believes that the constitutional journey must continue to speak to these consequential decisions, or that we've gone far enough in protecting against government intrusion into our autonomy, into the most personal decisions we make. Judge, that's why this is a critical moment.
We're going to go right back to Jan Crawford. She's had an opportunity to read more of the opinion. And Jan, what do you see?
Scott, we are processing what is in fact this complicated decision, but it appears the Chief Justice has joined with 4 of the court's liberals to uphold the mandate.
Jan, thank you very much. Headline of the hour. This is the most important thing that has happened so far. The Supreme Court has upheld the individual mandate, essentially affirming that President Obama's health care law is indeed constitutional. And the Congress did not exceed its authority when it essentially ordered every American to buy health insurance.
Okay, we're at Walmart and we're looking at the new Solo Health station. What's really unique about it is look at the scanner.
Show them that it's at your knee level.
Knee level.
For hand.
For your hand, where you can swipe your hand for the RFID chip. The questions it shouldn't really ask.
The Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, was passed in 2010, and the law makes health insurance available to more people with the hope that they will be able to get the care they need.
Scanner for
the new law also makes it easier for individuals to shop and compare all the different health plans with the healthcare marketplace. And depending on their situation, some may even qualify to get help paying for their plan through a subsidy. So what does this mean for you? Well, it means that all citizens must have health insurance or suffer hundreds of dollars in tax penalties that will increase each year. However, if they already receive coverage from their job, nothing really changes. It means that all citizens must have health insurance or suffer hundreds of dollars in tax penalties that will increase each year.
Assalamu alaikum. Many other Americans have Muslims in their families or have lived in a Muslim majority country. I know because I am one of them. But my father came from a Kenyan family that includes generations of Muslims. As a boy, I spent several years in Indonesia and heard the call of the azan at the break of dawn. I have known Islam on 3 continents before coming to the region where it was first revealed. That experience guides my conviction.
You're absolutely right that John McCain has not talked about my Muslim faith.
As the Holy Quran tells us, the Holy Quran teaches that, the Holy Quran tells us, and the Holy Quran also says, we will convey our deep appreciation for the Islamic faith, which has done so much over the centuries to shape the world. I would like to speak directly to the people and leaders of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Their great and celebrated culture. Over many centuries, your art, your music, literature, and innovation have made the world a better and more beautiful place. We know that you are a great civilization, and your accomplishments have earned the respect of the United States and the world. And when the first Muslim American was recently elected to Congress, he took the oath to defend our Constitution using the same Holy Quran. In the United States, rules on charitable giving have made it harder for Muslims to fulfill their religious obligation. That's why I'm committed to working with American Muslims to ensure that they can fulfill zakat. It is important for Western countries to avoid impeding Muslim citizens from practicing religion as they see fit. And I consider it part of my responsibility as President of the United States to fight against negative stereotypes of Islam wherever they appear. We are no longer a Christian nation. We do not consider ourselves a Christian nation. The United States has been enriched by Muslim Americans. Since our founding, American Muslims have enriched the United States. Islam has always been a part of America's story. There is a mosque in every state in our union and over 1,200 mosques within our borders. You know, one of the points I want to make is that if you actually took the number of Muslims Americans, we'd be one of the largest Muslim countries in the world. Let there be no doubt, Islam is a part of America.
He did bow to the Muslim king, while he did not do it to the British Queen of England. And by bowing, he showed the world that I am subservient. I do bow down to you as a Muslim king, something no other president has done with Saudi Arabia. The Saudi king is his peer. He is not his subordinate in order to bow for him. And this is exactly what Obama did. Usually it is out of respect that someone would nod his head when bowing to royalty, and the ladies will give curtsy. But Obama went beyond what is required as a head of state and bowed to the Saudi king, and that's unacceptable. It sent the wrong symbol.
When you say it sends the wrong signal, what signal do you think it sends?
It sent a message that Islam is superior to any other master or king or president in the world, that an American president bowed to a Muslim king. It also sent a message that terrorism and jihadism is giving Islam the respect it should have on the world stage, to the point that it made an American president, for the first time in history, bow to a Muslim king.
Presidential candidate Barack Obama is trying to change political fashion. He gave a speech in Iowa City today, and he wasn't wearing an American flag pin. Those pins have become synonymous with politicians since 9/11. Obama says he doesn't like how the pin has come to represent patriotism in America.
I won't wear that pin on my chest.
It's a little weird, Alan, that in the middle of the campaign, the guy takes off the American flag that most people wear because they're proud of their country.
Let me speak as clearly and as plainly as I can. America is not and never will be at war with Islam. Thank you. And Eid Shoma Mubarak.
In its final report, the 9/11 Commission ignored the following significant facts and questions that conflict with that report's conclusions. Why did a third skyscraper at the World Trade Center that was not hit inexplicably collapse? Building 7 at the World Trade Center was never hit by an airplane and had no significant fire. It was 47 stories high. It was constructed of steel. Yet at 5:30 p.m. it fell perfectly straight down into a small pile of rubble, just like a controlled demolition. Why did the Federal Emergency Management Agency lament that the specifics of the fires in World Trade Center 7 and how they caused the building to collapse remain unknown? Larry Silverstein, the leaseholder of Building 7, who collected insurance of $7 billion, is on tape saying he ordered the New York Fire Department to pull it, to destroy the building with explosives. In October of 2001, Scientific American told us that they just don't build them as tough as the World Trade Center. Considering that Meridian Plaza in Philadelphia burned fiercely for 19 hours yet never collapsed, how could the South Tower at the World Trade Center fall after burning less than 1 hour? How could the North Tower fall after burning only for 2? How could the jet fuel have caused the collapse when the Federal Emergency Management and other government agencies have stated that most of the jet fuel was gone in the initial fireball? Moreover, how could the fires have caused the collapse at all, since recent fire tests by Cardington found that a steel building survived fires in experiments with extreme temperatures beyond the range possible with jet fuel? Since the black smoke coming from the buildings means that the fire was oxygen-starved and could not have reached its maximum temperature of 1800 degrees Fahrenheit, and steel melts at a much higher temperature of 2500 degrees Fahrenheit, nearly 700 degrees hotter than the maximum temperature of the fire, how could cleanup crews have found melted steel in the basements? How could, days later, NASA satellite images show hot spots in the buildings that still exceeded the maximum temperatures possible? Explosives like C4, however, create temperatures of 3000 degrees Fahrenheit, which easily melt steel. Why did Fire Engineering magazine tell us that no steel building has ever been destroyed by fire, that the World Trade Center investigation was a half-baked farce? Why was all of the important evidence illegally destroyed, some before the investigation began? Why was $40 million spent to investigate Clinton's sex life, while only $600,000 was spent on investigating the World Trade Center fires and subsequent collapse? Why did the entire 9/11 Commission spend only $15 million, while expenditures on Clinton's lies exceeded $65 million? How could the airliner's impact have caused the collapse when wind gusts from storms had at times been greater than the impact of the airliners? Neither tower was bent, nor did they creak or groan at any time. Firefighters said they seemed sound and reported that there were no fires they couldn't control. How could the building collapse at the maximum speed of gravity? Each floor hit should have slowed the fall, just as if you drop a steel ball from the roof, it would fall faster without resistance. This couldn't have happened without explosives placed inside the structure. How could the concrete encased in a steel-framed pan with 2 layers of carpet over it, riveted inside columns of steel beams, welded together in a network with steel bands, be pulverized? How could steel beams and clouds of finely pulverized concrete come shooting out of the buildings at hundreds of miles an hour, traveling all the way to New Jersey. This is only possible with explosives. The buildings fell rapidly, according to the 9/11 Commission, because the bolts, rivets, and steel framework were weakened by the fire. If so, then how could the concrete be pulverized and ejected at high speed, since the force to do that is greater than the force needed to shear the weakened steel, bolts, and rivets? How could the Twin Towers fall straight down when the damage and resulting fires were only to one corner, two sides? Only the tops of the Twin Towers should have fallen, and they should have fallen over, not straight down. In fact, the top of one tower did fall over onto Building 4, so there was no building weight to crush the floors below. So what caused the collapse of those floors? How could a hijacker find and hit the Pentagon whose flight instructor said, "I'm still to this day amazed that he could have flown into the Pentagon. He could not fly at all"? How could a pilot this bad have the flight controllers comment, "The steep turn was so smooth, it's clear there was no fight for control going on"? The complex maneuver suggests the hijackers had better flying skills than many investigators first believed. Why did NORAD fail to stop the attackers 4 times on September 11, 2001? 3 times after they knew the planes were hijacked and intent on mass murder. How could this happen when NORAD had successfully intercepted off-course and suspected hijackings 67 times during the year prior to 9/11, according to the Associated Press on August 13, 2002? Why did Condoleezza Rice lie that the U.S. had no idea that terrorists would use hijacked airliners when Richard Cheney was commanding war games on 9/11, chasing phantom hijacked aircraft? Why were our Air Force planes diverted from intercepting the real hijacked airplanes? Isn't it too much of a coincidence that the 4 hijacked aircraft had only 20% of their seats filled, while all other transcontinental flights that day had 70 to 90% of their seats occupied? Why did the New York Times not publish the results of a Zogby poll which showed that 66% of New Yorkers want the 9/11 investigation reopened? This poll also found that 49% thought that VIPs in the government knew ahead of time and let it happen. Thus, the final report does or will not answer many important questions and has many inaccuracies.
FBI has access to the data collected, which is basically the emails of virtually everybody in the country, and the FBI has access to it. All the congressional members are on this surveillance too. It's not, no one's excluded. They're all included. So yes, this can happen to anyone if they become a target for whatever reason. If they are targeted by the government can go in, or the FBI or other agencies of the government can go into that database, pull all that data they've collected on them over the years, and reanalyze it all. So retroactively analyze everything they've done over the last 10 years at least. AT&T facility in San Francisco documented the NSA room inside that AT&T facility where they had NARIS devices to collect data off the fiber optic lines inside the United States. So that's kind of a powerful device that would collect everything that was being sent. It could collect on the order of over 100 billion 1,000 character emails a day. One device. I believe I've been on it for quite a few years, yeah. So I keep telling them everything I think of them in my email. The change is that it's getting worse. They're doing more. That's why he is supporting the building of the Buffdale facility, which is over $2 billion they're spending on storage alone of data. So that means that they're collecting a lot more now. The central government defines what is right and wrong and whether or not they target you. So it's not up to the individuals. They're violating the foundation of this entire country, of our entire foundation of why this entire government was formed. It's founded with the Constitution and the rights given to the people in the country under that Constitution. They're in violation of that. And under Executive Order 13526, Section 1.7, governing classification, you cannot classify information that just to cover up a crime, which this is. And that was signed by President Obama. Also, President Bush signed an earlier executive order, a very similar one. If any of this comes into the Supreme Court and they rule it unconstitutional, then the entire house of cards of the government falls.
But we begin tonight with a tale of two speeches, both from the same man, both from President Obama. One speech that could have been billed as a ballad to the Constitution, a proclamation of American values, a repudiation of the lawless behavior of the last presidential administration, and another speech announcing a radical new claim of presidential power that is not afforded by the Constitution and that has never been attempted in American history, even by George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. Remarkably, President Obama today made both of those speeches simultaneously. Standing inside the National Archives in front of the actual original Constitution, President Obama delivered a blistering critique of the Bush administration, in which he called their actions and their legacy literally a mess.
Our government made a series of hasty decisions. Poorly planned, haphazard approach. Too often, we set those principles aside as luxuries that we could no longer afford. Our government made decisions based on fear rather than foresight. The decisions that were made over the last 8 years established an ad hoc legal approach for fighting terrorism that was neither effective nor sustainable.
An ad hoc legal approach for fighting terrorism that was neither effective nor sustainable. Ouch. Then, moments later, he announced his own ad hoc legal approach for fighting terrorism. President Obama today proposed something new, something called prolonged detention. Doesn't sound that bad, right? Prolonged detention. Did you ever see the movie Minority Report? It was based on a Philip K. Dick short story. Came out in 2002. It starred Tom Cruise, remember? He played a police officer in something called the Department of Pre-Crime. Pre-crime is where people are arrested and incarcerated to prevent crimes that they have not yet committed.
Mr. Marks, by mandate of the District of Columbia Pre-Crime Division, I'm placing you under arrest for the future murder of Sarah Marks and Donald Dubinos. Take place today, April 22nd, at 0800 hours, 4 minutes. No, I didn't do anything.
You didn't do anything, but you're gonna. Future murder. Creepy, right? Putting somebody in jail not for what they've done, but for what you're very sure they're going to do?
There may be a number of people who cannot be prosecuted for past crimes. In some cases because evidence may be tainted, but who nonetheless pose a threat to the security of the United States.
We're not prosecuting them for past crimes, but we need to keep them in prison because of our expectation of their future crimes.
Al-Qaeda terrorists and their affiliates are at war with the United States, and those that we capture, like other prisoners of war, must be prevented from attacking us again.
Prevented. We will incarcerate people preventively. Preventive incarceration. Indefinite detention without trial. That's what this is. That's what President Obama proposed today, if you strip away the euphemisms. One civil liberties advocate told the New York Times today, quote, "We've known this was on the horizon for many years, but we were able to hold it off with George Bush. The idea that we might find ourselves fighting with the Obama administration over these powers is really stunning. And it is stunning, particularly to hear President Obama claim the power to keep people in prison indefinitely with no charges against them, no conviction, no sentence, just imprisonment. It's particularly stunning to hear him make that claim in the middle of a speech that was all about the rule of law.
But we must do so with an abiding confidence in the rule of law. Our government was defending positions that undermine the rule of law to ensure that they are in line with the rule of law.
How can a president speak the kind of poetry that President Obama does about the rule of law and call for the power to indefinitely, preventively imprison people because they might commit crimes in the future? How can those two things coexist in the same man, even in the same speech? Well, that brings us to the self-consciously awkward, embarrassing part of this speech today. After condemning the Bush administration for what he called their ad hoc legal strategy, for trying to make things seem legal that patently weren't, this is what President Obama proposed.
My administration has begun to reshape the standards that apply to ensure that they are in line with the rule of law. We must have clear, defensible, and lawful standards for those who fall into this category. We must have a thorough process of periodic review so that any prolonged detention is carefully evaluated and justified. Our goal is to construct a legitimate legal framework for the remaining Guantanamo detainees that cannot be transferred. Our goal is not to avoid a legitimate legal framework. In our constitutional system, prolonged detention should not be the decision of any one man. If and when we determine that the United States must hold individuals to keep them from carrying out an act of war, we will do so within a system that involves judicial and congressional oversight. And so going forward, my administration will work with Congress to develop an appropriate legal regime so that our efforts are consistent with our values and our Constitution.
You'll construct a legal regime to make indefinite detention legal. You will, what does he say? Develop an appropriate legal regime. So you can construct a whole new system outside the courts, even outside the military commissions, so that you can indefinitely imprison people without charges. And you'll build that system from scratch. What's that somebody said about ad hoc legal strategies? Just for context here, in the United Kingdom, where there isn't even a Bill of Rights, there's been a major debate about whether people can be held in preventive detention. Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair wanted 3 months to be the outer limit for how long anyone could be held. There was a big political fight about it. Parliament ended up limiting that power to 28 days. 28 days is still the longest period of preventive detention that's allowed under law in any comparable democracy anywhere in the world. How long would President Obama's proposed preventive indefinite detention last? Well, he's not saying yet, but here's how he defines the threat that he says makes indefinite detention necessary.
Right now in distant training camps and in crowded cities, there are people plotting to take American lives. That will be the case a year from now, 5 years from now, and in all probability 10 years from now.
10 years from now. So you could get arrested today and locked up without a trial, without being convicted, without being sentenced for, say, 10 years until the threat of your future criminal behavior passes. Prolonged detention, he's calling it. This was a beautiful speech from President Obama today with patriotic, moving, even poetic language about the rule of law and the Constitution, and one of the most radical proposals for defying the Constitution that we have ever heard made to the American people.
We cannot continue to rely only on our military in order to achieve the national security objectives that we've set. We've got to have a civilian national security force that's just as powerful, just as strong, just as well funded.
The U.S. Department
Department of Homeland Security, along with the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Office, have placed a large and rather interesting order. They've ordered 450 million rounds of ammunition to be made and delivered to them over the next 5 years. Now, the company Alliant Tech Systems, or ATK, was awarded the contract to manufacture 40 caliber ammunition high-performance bullets. Apparently these bullets, quote, provide optimum penetration for terminal performance. This refers to the way the tip of the bullet passes through barriers and expands, all the while holding its jacket in the toughest conditions. All right, so this is interesting because this is not the Pentagon making the order for the military. It's DHS and ICE. And to give you a little perspective here, there are only about 311 million people living in the entire country, so it begs the question, why such a massive order, 450 million bullets? David Seaman is a journalist and host of the DL Show. He's in our Miami studios, and I'm hoping he might be able to give us a little perspective on this. David, why does the DHS need 450 million hollow point bullets?
Hi, Christine. Well, the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, just to be clear with your viewers, consists of the TSA, the Transportation Security Administration, and Immigration Services, among other divisions. So, exactly, this is not the U.S. military. This is a domestic law enforcement agency, and the TSA are basically glorified bag screeners and airport screeners. That was their original congressional mandate, was to screen passengers before they get on an airplane. So the question really is, why do they need 450 million rounds of ammunition? And to be fair, some people online who don't want to believe what's going on have said that this is just going to be used for target practice, or also it could be that the government is simply stockpiling ammunition because they don't want to get into a situation where there's an ammo shortage and our law enforcement officers don't have any ammunition. And those are both fair points, but that kind of ammo that they purchased from ATK, hollow point ammunition, as you had explained, it's designed to, tear through human flesh and then expand. It's designed to kill people. This is not the optimal kind of ammo you would buy for target practice. It's more expensive and it's more precise.
I think that's
This is the new medical coding book. Well, not the newest one. We're looking up here, right there. Can you read that? E978, legal execution. Right there on page, what is that? KD9CM. The new code for beheading. Read it and weep. There it is.
days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who had used to work for me, and one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
Silence. Do not hold your peace or be still, O God. For behold, your enemies make an uproar. Those who hate you have raised their heads. They lay crafty plans against your people. They consult together against your treasured ones. They say,
"Come, let us wipe them out as a nation. Let the name of Israel be remembered no more."
For they conspire with one accord. Against you they make a covenant, the tents of Edom and the Ishmaelites.
The president might not be putting troops on the ground in the Middle East, but when it comes to the Syrian part of the operation, he personally will be taking an extraordinarily hands-on approach. In particular, the military will need to seek the president's approval before launching airstrikes. WSJ Pentagon correspondent Julian Barnes joins us more with this exclusive story. Good morning, Julian.
Good morning.
Congratulations on the great exclusive story there. So, is this unprecedented? How much independence does the military usually have in operations like this?
Typically, in an operation like we've seen in Afghanistan or Iraq, something we call a war, the president sets the parameters and the military has a free hand to operate within those parameters. But in other theaters like, say, Yemen or Somalia, where it's much more of a counterterrorism operation, strikes on so-called high-value targets, there's much more of a strong hand by the president. And that's what's going on in Syria. The White House wants this to look not like a war, but like a counterterrorism operation. And so they are, at least for the initial rounds, approving the strikes the military wants to take, keeping a tight rein on this operation.
I'm Julie Pace at the White House. We all woke up this morning to some news that can really only be described as stunning. President Barack Obama has been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, the Nobel Committee says they awarded this to Obama for his extraordinary efforts to strengthen international diplomacy and cooperation between peoples. Obama becomes the third sitting U.S. president to win the Nobel Peace Prize. But what's particularly shocking to a lot of Nobel observers is he only took office 2 weeks before the deadline to nominate someone for the Nobel Peace Prize. And of course, a lot of his critics are going to be saying, what has Obama done in the past 9 months to actually win this award? If you look at what the Nobel Committee said, a lot of this is really about setting a tone for this award. They take sort of a veiled jab at former President Bush, talking a lot about not Obama's actual accomplishments, but what he says he wants to do down the line.
The U.S. isn't saying which of the 5 detainees is the concern.
2 of them were senior commanders who were responsible for the death of 5,000 religious minorities in Afghanistan that they had liquidated. It showed us, just the release of those 5, how dangerous that is.
Mullah Mohammad Fazl was the Taliban army chief with ties to al-Qaeda. He was wanted by the United Nations in connection with the massacre of thousands of Afghans during the Taliban era. Hayar-ullah Saeed Wali Kerkwa was the Taliban interior minister. He is alleged to have been directly associated with Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda in Iraq's deceased leader, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. Mullah Nourullah Nuri was a Taliban governor with access to top officials. Abdul Haq Wasik was a senior Taliban intelligence official with ties to al-Qaeda intelligence. Mohammed Nabi Omari is believed to also be a member of the Taliban with ties to al-Qaeda and other militant groups. When the 5 are released from Qatar later this year, there may be nothing to prevent them from going back to fighting.
I'd like to say to Bo right now, who's having trouble speaking English, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Zayabayem. I'm your father, Bo. The people of Afghanistan, the same. Khalifa al-Thani.
Revelation 6. Now I watched when the Lamb opened one of the 7 seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures say with a voice like thunder, "Come!" And I looked, and behold, a white horse, and its rider had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he came out conquering and to conquer.
You talked to the president about how the Pope played in all this.
Yeah, what an historic day to be there, Robin. 18 months of secret talks. Incredible to think about this. And Pope Francis did play a significant role. The president telling me the two spoke at length about this when the two of them met last spring. And then, of course, allowing the U.S. and Cuba to use the Vatican this fall as a secret meeting place.
Good afternoon.
The Pope.
Yeah.
We know he reached out personally to both you and to President Castro. We now learn of this secret meeting at the Vatican. How crucial a role did the Pope play in all this?
Well, he played a very important role. You know, the Pope doesn't wield armies. He can't impose sanctions, but he can speak with great moral authority, and it makes a difference, and certainly made a difference in this case.
Associated Press reports that Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Gina McCarthy met with Vatican officials that helped draft Pope Francis's climate-related encyclical Friday. An encyclical is a letter from the Pope addressed to faithfuls worldwide when he feels he needs to reach them. It's set to be published in June and might make environmentalism a Catholic doctrine, just like Pope Pius IX's encyclical about infallibility. It might also be a simple condemnation of human destruction of the environment, like Pope Pius XI's encyclical against Italian fascists. The visit was aimed at showing the Holy See that the Obama administration shares similar thoughts on climate change.
For the first time in history, the Pope has allowed Islamic prayers in the Vatican. The Catholic facility allowed readings from Muslims' holy book, the Quran. Pope Francis met Israeli President Shimon Peres and Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, who committed themselves to the quest for peace during a meeting of key figures in the Middle East peace process. Do you think the reading of Quran should be allowed inside Vatican? Will this spoil the holiness of the Catholic facility? This is a question. The Washington Post quoted a Christian radio host, Brian Fisher, saying that Pope Francis shouldn't have allowed Muslim prayers to come from the Vatican because it was akin to sacrilege. They were praying to a demon god, he said. Muslims pray to a god that they refer to as Allah, who we know from the scriptures is not the true and living God, but is a demon god, Mr. Fisher said in a statement posted on Right Wing Watch, and which was quoted by Washington Post.
I mean, the first thing, let me restate the thing that I said before, which is that it is consistent with long-standing practice for the leader of a foreign government when they're planning to visit the United States to contact and coordinate that visit with the leader of the United States. And so, the invitation that was extended and the acceptance of that invitation did represent a departure from protocol. But ultimately, it's the responsibility of the Speaker of the House to make decisions about the floor schedule of the House of Representatives. President, at this point, does not plan to meet with Prime Minister Netanyahu on this visit that apparently is scheduled for March. The reason for that is that Prime Minister Netanyahu's visit comes about 2 weeks before the Israeli elections. And this administration goes to great lengths to ensure that we don't give even the appearance of interfering or attempting to influence the outcome of a democratically held election in another country.
Kevin. Eric, thanks. I want to ask you about Jeremy Byrd, who served as the National Field Director during the 2012 re-election campaign. He's said to be actively working in Israel as part of a concerted effort against Prime Minister Netanyahu. And I'm just curious, given all the friction between the administration right now and Jerusalem, How concerned are you with his activities right now?
Kevin, I haven't seen those reports, but I will tell you that we feel very good about the relationship we have with Israel. They are our closest ally in the Middle East. The President talks to Prime Minister Netanyahu more than any other foreign leader. They spoke, I believe, just a few weeks ago. So that relationship is as solid as ever. And so I'm not going to have anything more for you.
Would it be fair to say you would discourage other former administration, either officials or those who have worked with the administration, from engaging in such activity?
I have a lot on my plate. Taking to task what former administration officials do once they leave the White House is not something I'm going to engage in right here.
Today is really a historical event for the Jewish people. It is the beginning of the work of the Third Temple, construction for the Third Temple. Here in Mitzpe Yericho, we are building a field school for Kohanim and Levites in order to teach them the work that they have to do in Yerushalayim when the temple will be rebuilt.
We are starting to build the replica of the temple here in Mitzpe Yericho that will serve as a school to educate the Kohanim, the priests, how to serve in the temple. It will be an exact replica of the temple, and today we're drilling the holes for the libations, the water and wine libations in the altar.
And they will learn exactly what they have to do. When the time comes and the temple is rebuilt in Jerusalem, they will know exactly how to perform this service.
In the time when the Arabs are writing in Yerushalayim, and the spokesman is saying that the temple wasn't built in the Temple Mount. Never the Jews had the Bet HaMikdash there. If they would have there, they would never let the Arabs go up there. And this time that the Arabs are trying to throw us out of Har HaBayit, out of the Temple Mount, saying you don't have anything to do, we have to strengthen our connection in trying to show that we have what to say. We're going to teach the Kohanim how to work in Bet HaMikdash, and with God's help, faster than we have the students, we will have the people going to work and sacrifice korbanot in Bet HaMikdash.
During the Sukkot holiday, of course, the priests would do a water libation for the purpose of bringing blessing to the water that we so desperately need, especially now that there's been a drought for several years. And the water would drip down through what we call the shitin, these holes underneath the altar, down into the bedrock, and would bring a blessing to the waters of the world. So this is what's happening today, is that we're digging these holes in the ground as the beginning, as the first step in building this replica of the temple.
We've been waiting for the last 2,000 years for the rebuilding of the Third Temple. And here it is, for the first time, we're actually taking concrete measures in order to fulfill that dream and start the process of the Third Temple.